ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि ओम। Readings from Meditation and Spiritual Life, Chapter 20, Concentration and Meditation. First point: all concentration is not meditation. It is important to know the difference between ordinary concentration and meditation. By the word meditation, we mean dhyana or contemplation. It is not just ordinary concentration, it is a special type of concentration. In the first place, meditation is a fully conscious process, an exercise of the will. Secondly, meditation means concentration on a spiritual idea which presupposes that the aspirant is capable of rising above worldly ideas. And finally, meditation is done usually at a particular center of consciousness. It is clear that true meditation is a fairly advanced state attained after long practice. It is the result of long years of discipline. What is ordinarily known as meditation does not deserve the name. The mind is upset by various evil thoughts and tendencies, and worldly matters turn the mind away from the contemplation of God. To attempt time and again to draw the mind inward and fix it on God is the case with the majority of spiritual aspirants. Such a state is usually styled meditation. Really, it is pratyahara, withdrawing the outgoing mind. To keep the mind in the contemplation of the same thought for a short space of time is the next stage called dharana. When the outgoing tendencies are controlled and the mind flows continuously as a current in the contemplation of God, it is real meditation or dhyana. The concentration of a worldly man on his gross material gain, profit and enjoyment, the concentration of a scientist on his experiments, as for instance on the structure of an atom or the constitution of a plant, the concentration of a psychologist on the movements and laws of thought, the concentration of a yogi on the analysis of the ego and the non-ego, all these are but different forms of concentration, judged from the objective point of view. But considered from the subjective point of view, their contents differ very widely and they lead to altogether different experiences and results. The concentration of a spiritual aspirant, whatever the path he follows, is alone called dhyana or meditation or contemplation. The yogic seeker after truth, having no faith in God as ordinarily understood, may begin with meditation on gross elements associated with time and space, and then take up the elements beyond the limitations of time and space. He may next take up the subtle elements as the objects of his concentration and meditation, at first within time and space, and later on beyond their limits. Proceeding further, he may first make the mind or the inner organ, and afterwards the ego itself the object of his concentration and meditation. And knowing the true nature of these objects, he ceases to identify himself with these limiting adjuncts, and having come nearer to his true self, he enjoys a wonderful state of bliss and illumination. The Vedantic aspirant who believes in the existence of the divine may at the beginning meditate on the physical form of some great holy personality or a symbolic representation of the divine, first associated with time and space, and then without these limitations. Advancing further, he may meditate on the heart of the Holy Personality or on the Divine Mind and gradually imbibe the noble attributes associated with it. Later, he may pass on to pure consciousness, individual or cosmic, and thereby succeed in purifying and expanding his impure, limited consciousness. Come in touch with the infinite being within itself, and even proceed to the highest divine realization, in which the meditator, like a salt doll coming into contact with the sin, gets marked into the absolute divine principle. Thus, beginning with different forms of concentration and meditation associated with individual consciousness, he may reach the highest superconsciousness, the absolute reality, the one undivided principle, in which all subject-object relationship, nay, all relativity is completely transcended. Concentration by itself may not have any spiritual value. As has already been said, it may even be dangerous if the person who practices it has not already attained a certain amount of mental purification and does not continue the process of sublimation at the same time. Concentration and meditation becomes spiritually effective to the extent the mind is purified of its dross, of all the dark, bad impressions and tendencies that have been allowed to accumulate through successive evil thoughts and actions. With the attainment of great dispassion and purity alone can the aspirant take up successfully the higher forms of concentration and meditation, ultimately leading to the highest divine experience and freedom. Every average person has the capacity to practice concentration, although it is usually directed towards persons or objects of gain and enjoyment presented to him by the world. In order to follow the spiritual life, no new faculties need be created all of a sudden. The old capacities and tendencies are to be given a Godward turn without diminishing their intensity. And then the worldly man is transformed into a spiritual man. So the true devotee prays, Lord, may I think of Thee with that strong love which the ignorant cherish for the things of the world, and may that love never cease to abide in my heart. Our next point is need for discipline. Our mind is always out to deceive us and play tricks on us. Therefore, we need a strict daily discipline in everything we do. How to get the necessary mental training? That is the main problem in meditative life. Different thoughts constantly keep cropping up in our minds. When we wish to make the mind calm, the mind becomes most disturbed. It revolts the very moment we try to concentrate. It suddenly takes the form of a mighty ocean in which we are in danger of being drowned. The whole surface of the mind is disturbed by strong thought waves, and the more we try to calm it, the strong these become. So meditation makes us very tired in the beginning, instead of soothing us and bringing us light as it should. As in the case of a horse trainer who has to take great trouble to break the horse, we shall have to follow a certain definite system of discipline with great doggedness and tenacity in order to break the mind. In a spiritual discipline, there must be great definiteness regarding everything. It won't do for us to put two legs in two different boats. We must learn to follow one course definitely, step by step, without vacillating if we wish to reach the goal one day. The cravings of the flesh, our desires, usually stand in the way of real religion. The same thing you ordinarily see in life. going to places of worship and hearing religious instruction and then doing just as one pleases is not true religion. This kind of thing may have proved highly profitable for the church, but it is not following Christ's teachings. Proper discipline is essential for all forms of spiritual practice, and without spiritual practice, there can never be anything like true religion. The early Christians knew this perfectly well. So did many of the great mystics of the Middle Ages. But now the whole tradition seems to be lost in the West, and that is why the West is sinking to the level of the brute. As has been mentioned before, the mind is very much like an unruly horse which has to be broken. When we want to ride it, the horse acts in two ways. It either becomes very much restive or simply lies down and refuses to move. It does not wish to be steady. In order to break this unruly horse of our mind, a certain amount of ethical culture is necessary. So long as the thought of sex and money is allowed to dominate it, it cannot be broken. Our next point is need for purification of mind. If you attempt meditation without having attained purity of mind, you are likely to concentrate more on the impurities of the mind than on God. The higher centers must open in order to enable the aspirant to dwell on higher thoughts for long. Here comes the importance of prayer and doing good work. The novice should never be allowed to follow the path of exclusive meditation. In our monastic order, we never allow this. So long as you are not a perfect master of your thoughts, too much meditation is dangerous for you in the early period of your spiritual life. When you sit alone and try to quieten the mind, forbidden impure thoughts begin to rise in your mind and create confusion. These may even overpower you. It is better to spend only short periods in meditation in the early stage. The rest of the time must be usefully spent in work, service, or studies. This was what Christian monasticism learned from the lives of Christian ascetics of the early centuries. Since then, the Catholic Church has wisely enforced a combination of useful work along with contemplation. Without attaining a certain amount of sublimation and purification of the feelings and desires, concentration becomes very dangerous in the case of persons who have not prepared themselves properly for the higher life. It may lead to very bad effects. In a way, we all make the mind concentrated, but then we do not know how to manipulate it. This concentrated mind will run after sensual enjoyments and all kinds of worldly distraction and objects with a greater intensity for having become concentrated. So, if we do not know how to handle the mind in the right way, it may lead us astray. It is far better not to have concentration if one does not attain sublimation and purification at the same time. Therefore, the necessity of purity, non-injury, truthfulness, continence, etc. in thought, word, and deed has to be stressed very much. Without sublimation of all our desires and feelings, we cannot progress in the spiritual path. It is only after we have followed a strict code of ethics and morals that we should attempt concentration and meditation. The concentrated mind, if it is not purified, becomes a veritable demon and creates no end of troubles for the spiritual aspirant. Physical as well as mental purity is absolutely necessary. Sometimes we make the mistake of stressing only physical purity because it is so much more difficult to achieve true mental purity. There are many who satisfy themselves by taking baths, but who do not trouble themselves to have a pure mind. It is, however, impossible to concentrate a dirty mind on higher things. So long as there is the impure thought of woman in a man or of man in a woman, real higher concentration is out of the question for him or her. There may not be any gross physical relations, but it is sex all the same. And so long as there is any form of sex, purity has not been achieved, and without purity, higher spiritual life remains very far off. Next point is posture. The next point is a steady posture, that is asana, usually a sitting posture. Patanjali prescribes any posture that is steady and pleasant. Squatting, no doubt, is very helpful because the weight of the body is perfectly balanced in that posture. But it must be easy, otherwise it will disturb the mind of the person trying to attempt spiritual practice. For Indians, it is natural, but for many Western people, it may necessitate quite a lot of practice, and some may not be able to do it all. Anyway, for those who can, squatting is the best posture for spiritual practice. Our next point is rhythmic breathing. There are some people who find rhythmic breathing very helpful. Mind and breath are always interrelated and always act on each other. While doing pranayama, the proportion of inhalation, retention, and exhalation of breath should be 1:4:2. But it is not advisable to practice pranayama in the case of people who are too busy or immoderate. But just simple regulator breathing is good for all. However, mere retention of air is not enough. If it were so, a football bladder would be the greatest of all the yogis of the world. Along with rhythmic breathing, we must think intensely of purity. Everything is pure. I myself am pure. I am the embodiment of purity. Give such strong suggestions to your mind. Feel that with every breath, your body and mind are becoming purer and purer. Inhale purity, exhale purity. Feel yourself with purity. Inhale calmness, exhale calmness. Feel yourself holy with calmness. Or inhale peace, exhale all mental disturbance. Inhale dispassion and renunciation. Exhale all that is impure in your mind and body. Inhale strength, exhale all weakness and fear. Go on giving these intense suggestions to your mind again and again before coming to real meditation. Next point is content of meditation. Meditation should not be focused on the void. The beginner should not try to create a void in him. If he does it, either he may doze off or the void gets filled with impure thoughts. Meditation must have some definite positive spiritual content. Those who find meditation on the formless too abstract should center their feelings on some holy form. This is very effective in two ways. It leads one away from one's ego and sublimates one's feelings. If ever the picture of any person you used to love or hate troubles you, set up vividly the holy form you have chosen as your ideal against that. Your feeling for the storm should be pitched against the feeling you have for the person whose memory is now troubling you. Worldly pictures and feelings must be counteracted with pictures of and feelings for the divine. Those who can do this progress quickly in spiritual life without much trouble. He who feels intense love and attraction for his Ishtadevata will find meditation easy. Without ethical culture, we can never come in close touch with the divine. If, after creating a perfect void within, we are able to have the right thought, well and good, then this kind of practice will be very useful. But it is very dangerous for a beginner because he does not succeed in having the right thought after creating the void, but just falls asleep or is dominated by his subconscious mind. In the case of a beginner, there is always the great danger of his mind falling below the threshold of consciousness. Many people want to begin spiritual life from the topmost rung of the ladder, but that cannot be done. There are no long jumps in spiritual life, neither can anything be achieved without first finding out where one really stands. High philosophical flights and wonderful metaphysical dreams do not mean realization, and by themselves they never lead to realization, but only to abstract and superfine speculations that have no connection at all with real or practical life. They do not change in any way the life of the person who indulges in them. We should know where we stand and then proceed from there. We must begin as beginners and go on step by step. As an ideal, monism may be alright for us, but when we come down to the practical aspects, we are dualists and shall remain dualists for a long time to come. I am always amused when I hear somebody talking in high terms about the absolute, the principle, etc., because in most of these cases, all these are nothing but empty speculations and frothy words. Those do not even show that a particular person is fit for the monastic path. Nobody who stands in dualism, in whatever way this may be, is a monist, whether monism appeals to him or not. Very often, the mind of the modern man revolts against the idea of rigid formal meditation. He says, why should we busy ourselves with that? Have not we enough drudgery in the world? So, why should we follow practices which do not appeal to us? We want the absolute, so what is the use of japa, divine attributes or divine forms? Let us reach the absolute. Let us worship the divine in spirit and in truth. All this, no doubt, sounds very grand and highly spiritual, but as soon as we come down to actual life, we find that this kind of thinking does not produce anything at all. Mostly such people are confirmed dualists as far as their own actions in daily life go. To worship God in spirit and in truth is alright as an ideal, but how many people really do it? That is the point. For most people it means just hazy feeling and hazy thinking and acting in a way that has no connection at all with this spirit or truth. Our next point is center of consciousness. What next? After posture and rhythmic breathing, the thought of the divine must be taken up. We are to think of the divine. We are to have the center of one's consciousness, either in the head or in the heart. These two centers are safe for everybody. Never should a center below the heart be chosen. Here instructions can be imparted only to individuals because they differ from one another, but both head and heart are always safe if we do not consciously raise the nervous current at least up to the level corresponding more or less to the place of the physical heart. No spiritual meditation becomes possible. The conscious raising of one's nervous currents leads one beyond all sensual temptations and establishes one firmly in morals and ethical culture. For the majority of people, it is advisable to meditate in the heart. For highly emotional people, the heart center may not be suitable and may be avoided. They had better practice concentration in the head. They may later on come to the level of the heart, which is the gateway to superconsciousness. Next point is the heart as a center of consciousness. We use the word heart very freely, but what do we really mean by it? Is it the physiological heart, that hollow muscular organ which by alternate contraction and dilation keeps up the circulation of blood in the body? Once a disciple asked Swami Brahmananda, "Sir, in which center should I meditate? Should it be the heart or the center in the head?" Swami Brahmananda answered, "My boy, meditation can be practiced in any center you please, but I would advise you at first to meditate in the heart. Meditate upon your Ishtadevata in the lotus of the heart." Then the disciple asked again, "But Maharaj, the heart is made of flesh and blood. How can I think of God there?" And Swami Brahmananda replied, "I don't mean the anatomical heart. Think of the spiritual center situated near the heart. In the beginning, as you think of the Lord inside the body, you may think of flesh and blood, but soon you will forget the body, and there will remain only the blissful form of the chosen ideal." Sometimes we point to the region of the heart to indicate our emotions. We say, "From the bottom of my heart," etc. That may be called the emotional heart. Apart from the physical and emotional hearts, there is another heart called the spiritual heart, or the heart center, or the Anahat Chakra, very often pictured as a lotus, the heart lotus. It is the seat of intuition of higher spiritual consciousness. In this miracle of the human body, there are various chakras, centers of consciousness. Each chakra is the meeting point of the physical, mental, and spiritual bodies of man. The lowest three are located in the region of the organ of evacuation, the organ of reproduction, and the navel. These are connected with man's lower life, animal life, sensual life. The center located in the region of the heart is the fourth and is called Anahat Chakra. It lies between the lower three and the higher three centers. The heart and the higher three centers are connected with man's spiritual life. The three higher centers are in the region of the throat, in the region between the eyebrows, and in the head, respectively. You should not understand these centers physiologically. These are all like gateways to different planes of spiritual consciousness. According to the teachers of the Tantra, the Kundalini, or man's latent spiritual power, or you may say pure consciousness, which was originally located in the head center or Sahasrara, passed down the spiritual channel called Susumna through various centers of consciousness and reached the base of the spine. There it forgot itself. It then came under the sway of ignorance, was dominated by desires and passions. It forgot the way to go back. The task in spiritual life is to recollect our true nature and raise our consciousness from the lower centers to the higher centers. The heart, being in between the lower and the higher centers, is to be given preference. It is easy for us to practice our meditation there. Our next point is importance of the heart center. Again, the heart center is important because that is where you first feel the light of the Supreme Spirit who dwells within us as the soul of our soul. It is the special seat of the personal God. For devotees of God, the heart center is naturally the best place to meditate. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "The soul through which God spots is endowed with his special power. The landlord may reside in any part of his estate, but he is generally to be found in a particular drawing room. The devotee is God's drawing room. God loves to spot in the heart of his devotee. It is there that his special power is manifest. Intellectual people find it easier to concentrate in the brain center, but even for them it is better to begin with the heart center. Everywhere in the Upanishads, which mainly teach jnana, we find the heart is mentioned as the main center of consciousness. Mundaka Upanishad says, the all-pervading, all-knowing Supreme Spirit, whose glory is reflected in this universe, is seated in the luminous space in the city of Brahman. He guides the mind and the prana, and is located in the heart. By realizing him there, the illumined souls attain immortality and supreme bliss. According to our spiritual teachers, the heart is the holy center, which is a special seat of the Paramatman. There, he dwells in us as the soul of our souls. Highly emotional people may, for a time, concentrate in the space between the two eyebrows or in the brain center to keep their emotions from falling to lower centers. But spiritual experiences begin with the heart center. The plane of consciousness corresponding to the heart is the plane where the devotee is blessed with visions of the personal aspects of God. He sees the inner light and the luminous form of his Ishtadevata or chosen ideal. Such visions always bring with them also the conviction that he is a soul separate from the body. The devotee then realizes that he is a soul which has put on a pure mental body and a pure physical body, and that the Supreme Spirit who has assumed a blissful form for blessing him. When the devotee succeeds in entering the heart center, his body consciousness is forgotten, and at least for the time being, he remains conscious of the luminous and blissful presence of the divine. This happens when, as a result of his spiritual practices, he develops the subtle sense which enables him to understand the significance of the heart center. Then he understands the significance of meditating in the heart center and also what divine presence really means. Next point is, where is the heart center? When our spiritual consciousness awakens, we feel the eternal relation between the eternal soul and the eternal God. But where have people got the patience to make all these experiments themselves? They only come and ask questions. Many a time, after I had explained the significance of the heart center and asked the devotees to do a little spiritual practice, they would come without doing that and ask, now, where is the heart center? Is it located on the right side or on the left side? You have to discover that yourself. It is your heart, not mine. You have to find it out. This eternal question is there. The real task of the spiritual seeker is to develop this subtle inner sense. Without purity, chastity, and intense spiritual hunger, the heart center remains unopened, undiscovered. Here, I am reminded of a story. There was a great discussion between an American doctor and a Chinese doctor in China. The American doctor said, according to our physiologist, the heart is on the left side. The Chinese said, our books say the heart is on the right side. And a simple discussion developed into a terrible verbal quarrel. Each one wanted to drown the other by his argument. Then an old wise Chinaman came. He asked, my boys, what is the matter? Why are you quarreling like this? The two doctors explained their problem. The old man smiled and said, my boys, what does it matter if the heart is to the right or to the left? Let the heart be at the right place. So, we should discover the right place, forgetting the physiological heart, forgetting all theories. According to many spiritual men, the heart is neither at the right nor at the left, but near about the middle of the chest. where we usually feel the reactions of our emotions, pleasant and unpleasant, but none of them mean the physiological heart. They mean that in the middle of the body there is a region in which lies what they call akasa or space, or you may call it ether. Meditation is to be performed in the akasa, which exists in the heart, which feels it and transcends it. Now, try to understand the meaning of the spiritual center we call the heart. Try to feel a little consciousness there, and then, with the help of a little reasoning, think. The little consciousness that is here is the consciousness that permeates the entire body. Isn't it true? We touch any part of body. If it is not paralyzed, we feel the sensation. Similarly, this consciousness permeates our entire mental body. Mind is matter, subtle matter. It becomes active because of the touch of consciousness. This body of bones and flesh, all matter, appears to be alive with the touch of the spirit. Our last point is contact between the soul and God in the heart. The ancient Rishi declared, there is a pure, subtle, sinless seat, lotus-like in form, situated in the middle of the body. Within this lies the sorrowless, subtle akasa. Meditation is to be practiced in this space. Think of the akasa or space in what you call the heart. This space that is there is a part of this space that penetrates and permeates our physical body and mental body. It is the seat of our Atman or self, and that again is a part of the space which is everywhere, the Paramatman or Narayana. The word Akasa has a deep meaning. This space that is in this room appears to be limited. But is it really limited? No, it cannot be. The space in the room is inseparable from the space outside it. The walls only appear to limit it. So also is the case with the spirit that appears to be limited by the heart. What appears to be limited is inseparable from the unlimited. That is what the Upanishadic teacher says in the section called Antaryami Brahmana in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The infinite spirit dwells in the earth, in the water, in the fire, in the sky, in the air, in the heaven, in the sun, in the moon, in the stars. He also dwells in the eye, the mind, the intellect, permeates everything. He is the inner controller and your own immortal self. But this spiritual seeker should actually realize all this through his meditation. It is not enough to talk about the Atman. One should feel it, seek it, and finally experience it. In the Vedantic way of thinking, the individual and the universal are inseparable. Just as we have a body, and in the heart there is this akasa, so also there is akasa in the cosmic heart, if you may say so. The same akasa permeates our mental body and the cosmic body. The same spirit permeates our individual soul and the universal spirit. He is the one beyond all names, beyond all forms, who manifests himself as the individual and the cosmic. The text beginning with Dahram Vipapam has got many interpretations, but casting aside all philosophical disputations, we may safely accept that the individual soul dwells in the akasa, in the heart, and the Supreme Spirit dwells in the soul, is the soul of all souls. All our teachers tell us that our individual consciousness is part of the cosmic consciousness. The individual cannot exist independently. Can a bubble exist without the ocean? Can a little ray of light exist without an infinite light? Can the space that is here in the heart exist without the infinite space? No. The individual and the universal are inseparable. We must realize the eternal contact between the individual and the universal in the heart center. Think intensely of the heart center and imagine it to be a center of divine consciousness. Have the thought that the divine consciousness which is within you is also outside, part and parcel of an infinite of consciousness which is undivided and indivisible. In the beginning, you may think of this consciousness as light, but really speaking, what is meant is the light of intelligence, that is the divine light. And this divine light, which is in me, pervades at the same time the whole universe and is one and eternally indivisible. This body of ours is like a temple of Brahman. Remember always, each body is a temple of Brahman. Having done all this, try to merge your consciousness in the divine consciousness, as in the case of the salt doll getting merged in the sea. You know the parable of Sri Ramakrishna about the salt doll. Our body consciousness stands in the way, and as soon as we try to merge it in the divine consciousness, we get the idea that the soul is not the body. In the beginning, all this is just imagination. But remember, it is imagination about the real. It is not a vain imagination. If we sincerely persist in our spiritual practice, we will one day realize the reality about which we have been imagining for a long time. Now, let us sum up what we have discussed so far. Dhyana or meditation is not just ordinary concentration. It is a special kind of concentration, which is the result of spiritual discipline and moral virtues. It must have a spiritual content. It is done on a particular center of consciousness. The heart is the best center for all beginners. Finally, meditation means the union of the soul with God. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.